All right, beginning Roman numeral 10, part 2, the New Deal. Letter B, Roosevelt philosophy. So let's take a look at first, believed in Keynesian economic theory, which is deficit spending, prime the pump, throw money at it, and hope to get the economy going back again. So here you got the government priming the pump with all kinds of projects. Primary function of government was economic stabilization. So this is new. This didn't used to be this way. So believe the role of deficit spending in influencing the economy. Roosevelt knew little about economics, but surrounded himself with experts, a whole bunch of college professors. He was one of those rare individuals who welcomed conflicting opinions of experts without having them dictate a course of action. He was someone has characterized him as having a flypaper mind, very sharp guy. He establishes the Brain Trust, a bunch of college professors at first. Now, he rejected planned economy, but suggested a new economic constitutional order. Basically, radically changing the role of the federal government. So, when you talk about changing the role of the federal government, there are big moments in history, certain presidents in history, and certainly Roosevelt is both. Probably more than any other president, increases the power of the presidency and the federal government. Favors, well, there's a picture of the Brain Trust. Favors bold experimentation. My quote is SF5 for this. The country needs and demands bold, persistent experimentation. It is common sense to take a method and try it. If it fails, admit it frankly and try other. But above all, try something. So he gets to his first inaugural address, first day in office, and that's where he gives this famous speech. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
This is preeminently the time to speak the truth frankly and boldly. Nor need we shrink from honestly facing conditions in our country today. This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance.
All right, the 3 R's approach. I've already gone over this with you. Relief, recovery, reform. He rides the initial mandate of the people in that blowout election in a blitzkrieg of legislation introduced during the 100 days. So his first 100 days, there you see even the cover of it, first 100 days, and boy, there's a lot done. So hang on tight the first 100 days. You can see the first New Deal banking, how many banks there were. Wow. How many bank failures there were, excuse me. Roosevelt declares a bank holiday. Whoa, stop it. I mean, they're folding like, they're every day. Banks are closing over and over, all over the place. So he closes all banks in the country for 4 days. And under the Emergency Banking Relief Act, all banks are examined and only sound ones allowed to reopen. President Obama will follow the same example and do the same thing. And President Bush. Fireside chat. Gets on the radio and addresses the country and he says, I can assure you that it is safer to keep your money in a bank than under your mattress. You know, if everybody's keeping their money under their mattress, there's no money to invest. So he's trying to bring confidence back to the banks. And it works. Within 1 month, $10 million is redeposited in banks. People are putting their money back into banks. Glass-Steagall, first 100 days, sets up the FDIC, which we've gone over. This successfully restores confidence in the banking system. Now, we need cash. We need money. So, the Beer and Wine Revenue Act basically gets rid of the gets rid of the 18th Amendment with the 21st Amendment and legalizes beer and wine and then taxes them. Now, remember, this is going to be very beneficial to wheat growers, corn growers for making alcohol. First 100 days in unemployment. You tax with CCC, Federal Emergency Relief Act, CWA, PWA, WPA. So let's go over them. So the CCCs we've already talked about brings young men from the cities back out into the workplace. Critics called it boondoggling, an exercise in shovel leaning, and sneered, "The only thing we have to fear is work itself." The jobs are, excuse me, I'm on the wrong notes. My bad. Oh no, I went too far. I was like, wow, I'm dogging it out. It's not a bad program. I'm so sorry. So here it is. One of the most successful of all the public works projects. If you've ever been in the Blue Ridge Parkway, they built it. 5 million eventually served in the CCCs. They were required to send home $25 to $30 earned each month. So they only got to keep 5 of 30. 5/6 of the money went back home to mom. Now, there's a few reasons why you organize this particular group. One, young men, well, that's the most volatile of all groups, fear of revolution. Number 2, keep heads of households employed. Keep youth out of the labor market. So you take them, you put them in the CCCs, they're not competing with jobs with dads who got 5 kids. Take those 19-year-olds, send them out into the woods. And this is providing money home for mom. Number 2, CCCs, let's get that. Let's go to video if we can get it here. Well, we'll give up on that video. Seems my arrow's not working. There we go.
Opinions differ on the CCC as an American institution. Some point with alarm to its huge drain on the federal treasury. Some fear it as a potential New Deal fascist army. But there is no debate on the value of the job the CCC boys have done to date for their country and for themselves. $335 million is the value officially put on their services to the nation in building bridges, dams, roads, improving the national parks and national forests.
CCC's, by any stretch of the imagination, was a success, and this was FDR's favorite program. All right, the FERA, let's face it, FERA is nothing but checks going home. This is not recovery, this is not reform, this is pure 100% relief. Headed by Harry Hopkins, one of the brain trusts, when asked why they didn't seek a long-term solution, Hopkins replied, "People don't eat in the long run." All right, now we get the CWA. CWA. This is just get jobs going, man. The Civil Works Administration. Just jobs, jobs, jobs. I don't care what it is. Just get jobs. So it serves 4 million people just from November to April. Spent $1 billion on public works projects. Schools, parks, roads. And this is the one where I got off track here. Critics called it boondoggling. I like this. An exercise in shovel leaning. And sneered, "The only thing we have to fear is work itself." yeah, there were some people who just didn't do anything. This was just to get checks out. This was just to get money out there. The jobs were merely temporary for the duration of a hard winter. Criticism would end it early. What replaces it is the WPA. So let's look at the PWA. Headed by Harold Ickes, had started off with $4 billion budget and completed 34,000 projects. Not jobs, projects. But this is the biggest of them all, the Works Progress Administration, the WPA. And honestly, this is really part of the second New Deal. And it was capitalized at $11 billion. Roads, bridges, schools, cricket control, and building money pens in Oklahoma. There are all kinds of jobs. You can find a million little agencies within the WPA, from painters to artists to music to counting crickets. I don't know if you've heard of an author named Steinbeck, but when he was a young man, he was supposed to count dogs in California. That was his job, to count dogs. Critics dubbed it the "We collect alms," or "We work all day for the WPA, let the market crash, we collect our cash." Purpose of these projects was just to pump money in the economy, give people a sense of worth. Okay, so you have one guy dig a hole. You have the second guy fill the hole. But each one of them went home with a paycheck, and because they did something. They didn't just take charity. So there were a lot of critics, but not just one side, both sides. It was too much government. It was not enough government. So let's look at the major ones. We've already previewed them in the last film. On the right, they were criticized undermining the capitalistic system. Basically, a lot of socialistic programs within the New Deal. On the left, they were attacked for not going far enough. Father Charles Coughlin, one of the major critics, had a huge audience of 35 to 40 million on radio, urged broader relief efforts. A little bit of a racist, so he's going to kind of die out later on. Huey Long, the kingfish who I showed you from Louisiana, offered to share the wealth program, $5,000 to everybody, but it's assassinated. And Francis Townsend, provide every unemployment with over 60, with $200 per month as long as they spent it towards each month. These Townsend clubs sprang up throughout the United States. It was basically to help older retirees. This is the forerunner to Social Security, perhaps.
There is written in the Constitution of the United States that Congress has the right to coin, issue, and regulate the value of money. That's good Americanism, and it's good enough for me. Every politician today in the Democratic or Republican ranks who sits upon one of the thrones of the mighty doesn't believe in that part of the Constitution. They don't want to believe in that part of the Constitution. They believe that the Federal Reserve Bank has the right to coin and regulate the value of money. They're not even Americans, these so-called Democrats and Republicans. And so, Mr. Roosevelt, who was very loquacious in 1933 about driving the money changers out of the temple, is now bent upon another policy.
So there's critic Father Coughlin. The Roman Catholic Church will pull him off the radio once he gets a little too anti-Semitic. All right. Attacking the industrial economy. Recovery. So here we're going to get to the second R, recovery. And the the NIRA, which creates the NRA, is set up in 1933. Its purpose was to get business and labor to cooperate. Sent voluntary codes of fair competition. It said maximum hours you could work a week is 35 to 40. We want to spread out the hours amongst many workers. Established a minimum wage at 30 to 40 cents per hour. Guaranteed the right of labor to organize. Outlawed yellow dog contracts and child labor. Established minimum prices as well. So it says this is the lowest you could sell something at. Keeping the prices high. Remember, under consumption, all of that stuff was killing the farmers. And that blue eagle, that symbol of the program, became the symbol of business participation. You would put that poster in the window showing you were doing your part. Serious problems with this. Critics called the NRA the National Runaround or the Nuts Running America. Henry Ford called it the New Age of Chiselry and referred to the Blue Eagle as that damned Roosevelt buzzard. In 1935, Supreme Court rules it unconstitutional in Schechter versus the U.S. It delegated too much power to the executive branch. Roosevelt called it the horse and buggy decision, but probably welcomed it since the NRA wasn't really working that well. Here's a reason to get rid of it, so you don't have to take the blame. You can blame the court. Now, attacking the farm problem. So we're going to get the AAA. Its purpose was to create artificial scarcity. Get rid of the extras. And now if something is scarce, the value goes up. Farmers get more. So pay farmers to grow less. So we're going to pay at the average price of 1909 to 1914. We'll pay at that price. The problem was that some crops were already planted. 10 million acres of cotton were plowed under. Crop failure in wheat prevented its destruction. 6 million pigs were destroyed and 200,000 breeding sows. The effect of this is farm income rose $5.6 billion to $8.7 billion. Supreme Court rules it unconstitutional in 1935. You can't pay people. So if you think what they're doing, they're taking money from one taxpayer and giving it for what they did at work, and they're giving it to another taxpayer to not work. So here I'm taking your money to pay him not to work. It didn't fly in the Supreme Court. It would be replaced by the Soil Conservation and Domestic Allotment Act of 1936. Pay farmers to plant cover crops to conserve the soil. Things like clover or soybeans. Things that would help with the soil. You'll get a second AAA adjusted to get around the Supreme Court ruling in 1938. Only difference was financing of the law's programs would be provided by the federal government and not the tax. You get the Emergency Farm Mortgage Act, prevented foreclosures. We've talked about these. The Frazier-Lemke Act halted foreclosures for up to 5 years. It'd be ruled unconstitutional. Resettlement Administration, designed to relocate farmers to productive areas. Some other monetary reforms. We get the Federal Securities Act. Requirement of fuller disclosure. Sought to put an end to paper companies. Basically, instead of let the buyer beware, now it's let the seller beware. You better be dealing above board. You get the SEC, which is still around today. Established a regulatory agency to oversee the operation of the stock market. And, of course, we talked about the TVA. Tennessee Valley Authority. I think I went over this in excellent detail. Only thing here, the critics we should go over argued that it was creeping socialism. And it was the government taking over the power companies. Housing problem. Remember the construction problem we had. Established the Homeowners Loan Corporation to refinance mortgages. The Housing Act, National Housing Act, establishes Federal Housing Administration, the FHA, which provided low-interest loans. So we're giving people an opportunity to buy houses, get the market going again. And the United States Housing Authority, designed to provide money for cities and states to construct low housing units. Social Security. Support for older workers, and thus keep them out of the job force. So thus they retire and they're not competing for jobs. This is one of the problems with the generations today. Baby boomers have had excellent health care, allowing them to work much longer, staying into the workforce, not making way for newer, younger millennials. Provided old age compensation, unemployment insurance, aid for dependents and handicapped, so children and those who have disabilities. FDR considered this the cornerstone piece of the Second New Deal. So if you're going to talk about First New Deal, that FERA, that started off for the first 100 days, I'm calling it wrong here. I'll move it on. Tackling labor problems. Usually during tough times, you're going to get a lot of strikes, a lot of unrest. You're going to get in San Francisco, Bloody Thursday, and Memorial Day Massacre in Chicago in 1937. Do I really need to give you the details? You can research them on your own, but come on. I mean, the names say it all. Roosevelt represented the first president who was actively sympathetic to labor. Now you had Teddy, who took a middle ground. Here you got a president who's actually on labor's side. Now, this is getting labor support, organized labor support for the Democratic Party. The Wagner Act, which we've gone over already. And we've gone over organization, the combination of the AFL-CIO. Okay, FLSA, Second New Deal, minimum wage, maximum hours, child labor. All right, now the election of 36, Roosevelt is going to be the Democratic choice. Republicans settle on Alf Landon, governor of Kansas. He had few political enemies. The campaign is largely issueless. Landon basically promises to do the same thing Roosevelt is, just more efficiently. William Lemke offers a radical alternative with the Union Party, basically a coalition of Father Charles Coughlin, Francis Townsend, and Gerald Smith, who had taken control of Huey Long, share the wealth movement. So those three critics that I went over, this combination of them comes up with the Union Party. Democrats are able to hold their coalition together. Blacks, South, intellectuals, women. Outcome, Roosevelt, big time win. 523 electoral votes to Landon's 8. Lemke didn't even get 1 million votes and 0 electoral votes, signaling that the Americans were unwilling to seek truly radical solutions to the Depression. There's an argument. Was FDR a socialist, or did he just not go far enough, or did he go just far enough to save capitalism? There are many differing opinions on this. You take your call, but this right here, SFI, would show that radical, we just weren't willing to go down that radical road quite yet. All right. Now, a Literary Digest poll predicted Landon as the easy winner. What went wrong? Well, they took their polling on the telephone. Well, not everybody had telephones, especially poor people. Poor people were much likely to vote for Roosevelt. James Farley predicted on election eve that Roosevelt would carry every state except Maine and Vermont. Significance of, as Maine goes, so goes the nation. Now, there is a theory that presidents who receive massive mandates, as Roosevelt did, tend to misread those mandates and get into political trouble. They're like, oh man, the people got my back. I'm going for it. And they read too much into it. And that's where FDR gets in trouble with the court packing scheme. I showed you all the cartoons, irritated at the court, considering up to 15 additional justices. I showed you this cartoon. Of course, the Democratic Party even upset with their own president. So you got to, from the public at large, conservatives within the Democratic Party viewed as an attempt to upset the separation of powers. It's funny though, right as this happens, you start seeing Supreme Court justices starting to go with FDR instead of against him. So, as this is about to happen and FDR is getting in trouble for it, you're going to get the Supreme Court switching, making it unnecessary for FDR to have to appoint another one, since Oren Roberts begins voting with FDR. Quote, a switch in time saves 9, meaning saving the 9 Supreme Court justices instead of having 15. Also, one justice retires, giving Roosevelt a chance to swing the majority in his favor. He bans the court's backing scheme, loses the battle, but wins the war with the Supreme Court. So government reorganization designed to streamline efficiency, coming straight out of the progressive scientific management model. You get the Hatch Act, prohibiting federal employees below the highest policy-making roles from campaigning or soliciting for campaigns. So if you are working for the federal government, you're not allowed to campaign. Now, decline of the New Deal. Roosevelt responded to criticism by cutting make-work programs in 1937 and 38. Now, everybody was dogging on his program, so he gets rid of a few of them, saying we're starting to recover. The result? Serious recession. Man, he cut those programs. Boy, the economy started falling again. The programs were restored, but the lag time hindered immediate improvement. The Republicans really cut into the majorities of the Democrats. So now FDR is going to be stuck with a very slim majority. And he's going to have a problem. Should I use my influence, my mandate, to have a third New Deal? Or do I use all this influence to try to get isolationistic America more involved in what's coming over in that crazy Europe and Asia? This, you're seeing, is the end of the New Deal. Let's take a look at women and minorities in the New Deal. Very limited gains for both groups. You look at Social Security. It would exempt 2 professions: farmers and domestic workers, maids. Guess what African Americans' 2 most prevalent jobs were? Maids and farmers. These groups would expect to be the hardest hit during the Depression. Women probably fared a little better. Working women were frowned upon, taking jobs from head of households. Frances Perkins becomes the first woman cabinet member, Secretary of Labor. And of course, Eleanor Roosevelt worked hard for minorities. Personally intervened when opera singer Marian Anderson was denied by the Daughters of American Revolution the right to perform, so she will step in. Mary McLeod Bethune headed the National Youth Organization, and she led meetings of the Black Cabinet, black governmental leaders who met every Friday. By 1941, there were 150,000 black federal employees. Compare that with just 38 black federal employees under Hoover. Nevertheless, opportunities were still limited. The AAA was accused of forcing blacks off land. The CCC and WPA were both segregated. And hey, we have an example right here in Penderley, North Carolina, a town started by Mrs. Roosevelt. African Americans were not allowed. Roosevelt failed to support anti-lynching and poll tax elimination. But you got to remember why. He's got to hold together his coalition. And the main center of that coalition was the Solid South. Du Bois encouraged voluntarily segregating. He said, man, we shouldn't be with those whites. 200,000 Mexicans will be deported after 1932. You got to figure, hey, that's compete for jobs. So let's look at the New Deal balance sheet. First, negative results. Vastly increase the federal debt. Go from $19.4 billion to $40 billion. Stimulated class consciousness. We didn't have that before. Now all of a sudden we got that among farmers and workers. Who's upper class? Who's middle class? Who's lower class? Increased bureaucratic administration inefficiency. When you add more federal government, you add more inefficiency. Federal government's slow. Hey, post office, need I say more? Slowed the growth of the civil service reform. Infringed on free enterprise system. And raised the future question of the balance of government power versus individual rights. Don't we have that right now? Should you be forced to take a vaccine? Should the federal government have the power to be able to do that? Should they be able to segregate you based upon whether you did or not? Should they have the power? Positive results. Whatever you may say eventually it leads to the downfall of the capitalist system, opening up radical socialism, but capitalism was preserved for the moment, brought labor and industry into better balance, achieved a slightly more equitable distribution of income, and conserved many of the nation's national resources, established the principle of positive government action. Now let's look at important results. Increase the size of government, increase the cost of government, increase the power of government. Know that, love that, learn that. Here's where you're looking at the big picture. This is where you can see a lot of your complexity. Firmly establish the principle that economic stability is the primary responsibility of government. Whether you agree with that or not, that's what now is established. The Federal Reserve System put that on par, and the New Deal cements it. And certainly, once the 1950s come and Republicans hold all of Congress and the presidency and do not repeal the New Deal, it's certainly cemented in. In doing so, it creates a greater dependence upon government of its citizens. Is that a good thing? Should social welfare be a primary responsibility of the federal government, state government, any government? Will people continue to give to charities if they think now that the government's taking care of it? Will they do better than your church? Public view of Roosevelt, strongly positive or strongly negative. He's one of those presidents, kind of like Reagan, Jackson, Trump, where it was either you love him or you hate him. And I mean hate. To some degree, the New Deal is a culmination of the progressive movement. This is all those progressive ideas, starting from populists. Maybe even going all the way back to Jacksonian era. What is he doing? Oh, I think he's contextualization. Oh, yeah, going back to Jacksonian reforms. Then we get to reforms of the Gilded Age under the populists, and then the progressives, and then the New Dealers. Whatever it did, the New Deal did not end the Depression. It's World War II that ends the Depression. So all these programs, all this takeover of the federal government, did they cure the Depression? No. But certainly emotional well-being of the country was certainly lifted. And that's the end of the New Deal notes.